All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Tech Forum session. I'm Stephanie Small. I am a product coordinator at BookNet Canada. Welcome to Green Paths, Learning from Publishers' Sustainability Journeys. Before we get started, BookNet Canada acknowledges that its operations are remote and our colleagues contribute their work from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wyandot, the Mi'kmaq, the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation, the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, and finally, the Métis, the original nations and peoples of the lands we now call Beaton, Brampton, Guelph, Halifax, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Vaughan, and Windsor. We encourage you to visit the native-land.ca website to learn more about the peoples whose lands you are joining us from today. Moreover, BookNet endorses the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and supports an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space-making in the book industry. The book industry has long been an industry of gatekeeping, and anyone who works at any stage of the book supply chain carries a responsibility to serve readers by publishing, promoting, and supplying works that represent the wide extent of human experiences and identities in all that complicated intersectionality. We at BookNet are committed to working with our partners in the industry as we move towards a framework that supports space-making, which ensures that marginalized creators and professionals all have the opportunity to contribute, work, and lead. In the spirit of that acknowledgement, I confirm BookNet's and my own responsibility to mend the sacred hoop with Canada's Indigenous peoples, to be an ally to all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and to unite and work together alongside one another. For our webinar today, if you're having difficulties with Zoom or have any tech-related questions, please put your questions in the chat, or you can email techforum@booknetcanada.ca. We're providing live ASL and closed captioning for this presentation. So to see the captions, please find the Show Captions button in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. If during the presentation you have questions for us, please use the Q&A panel found in the bottom menu. Lastly, we'd like to remind attendees of the Code of Conduct. Please do be kind, be inclusive, be respectful of others, including of their privacy, and be aware of your words and actions. Please report any violations to techforum@booknetcanada.ca. Please do not harass speakers, hosts, or attendees, or record these sessions. We have a zero tolerance policy. You can find the entire Code of Conduct at bnctechforum.ca/code-of-conduct. So without further ado, let me introduce the moderator for this panel, EJ Hurst. EJ is the sales manager and head of sustainability at New Society Publishers. She holds a degree in environmental studies from the University of Waterloo and joined the New Society Publishers team as a marketing coordinator in 2007. Since that time, she has been dedicated to working with the team at New Society to advance their mission to publish books for a world of change in a way that has a minimum impact on our environment. Over to you, EJ.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. I am joining you today from the unceded traditional territory of the Sununnemuk from First Nations in Nanaimo, and we're on Gabriel Island, BC. So thank you to BookNet for putting together this event and inviting Nehmetallah, Sandra Shaw, and Karina Stevens to share insights into their company's unique sustainability journeys. It's a great opportunity for sharing ideas and collaboration and getting information. Every speaker will give a short presentation, following which there'll be a question and answer period where we can answer questions from the audience. As it was already mentioned, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A panel as we go along. And remember, there's no stupid questions. We're all here to learn and share, and everybody's at a different stage of their journey. Incorporating sustainability practices into publishing operations can be challenging, but it's very rewarding. So to demonstrate what small publishers can plan for and accomplish, I'll invite Nehmetallah, he's the publisher at Invisible Publishing, to share some insights into their journey towards a more sustainable publishing operations. Over to you, Norm.
Thank you, EJ. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen and try to get my PowerPoint operating. I'm not really a PowerPoint person, so bear with me here. I'll also mention that I'm a little nervous for some reason when it comes to virtual presentations, more so for some reason also than in-person presentations, which is a new feeling that I'm exploring. So hi, everyone. My name is Norm Nehmetallah. I'm coming to you from the north side of Fredericton, New Brunswick, directly next to Sitansik, an urban Wostocky community on the Wostock River. Speaking of rivers, it's a privilege to be wading into the occasionally, actually mostly murky depths of sustainability in independent publishing with all of you. Before I start, I'd like to kind of at least address the elephant in my room, which is that we're meeting during an ongoing genocide in Gaza, which weighs very heavily on me and probably many of you, and is also itself a climate catastrophe. So it does feel a little futile to be discussing sustainability and that kind of stuff in the face of that. Okay, so I'm going to situate the press a little bit before jumping into our constantly evolving attempts to be as sustainable as possible. I'm really interested in the rest of this panel, actually, mostly because I know what we're already doing vis-a-vis sustainability, but also because we're all such different publishers, and I admire the publishing program so much of the other attendees here. So excited for that, and I'll try to talk as little as possible. So Invisible Publishing is a not-for-profit indie publishing company. We were founded in 2007 as a cooperative in Halifax by three friends, one of whom, Megan Fildes, still works at the press as our art director. We publish primarily Canadian fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, with a focus on emerging writers in both English and increasingly in translation. So our team currently consists of me, the publisher, Kim Griffiths, our director of editorial and production, Megan Fildes, our art director, and Jules Wilson, our publicist. Our primary editorial team, who mostly live in Ontario, consists of Brian Nebeus, Del Cowie, Alicia Elliott, and Bart Vautour. All of us work remotely except for Kim, who manages our physical office space and inventory above the historic Regent Theatre in downtown Picton, Ontario. We publish 8 to 10 books a year, and I myself have worked in publishing for 9 years, first at Biblioasis and then at Coach House Books and Penguin Random House Canada. I took the reins at Invisible from Lee Nash, who I hope most of you know, 2 years ago. And I was lucky enough to be coming at accessibility from the same mindset as Lee, and have inherited so many good processes and systems from her, as well as, many elements of this presentation by virtue of that. So very grateful to her. So at our size, sorry, I should forgot to move to the next slide. This will tell you some stuff that I just said. So at our size, or perhaps at any size, I think that one of the most important considerations of sustainability in publishing, and maybe just generally, is to keep one's scope somewhat limited. And I recognize that that isn't possible for everyone. And so, coming from a small, independent, not-for-profit publisher, just based on the kind of work that we're interested in publishing at Invisible, we don't tend to publish cookbooks or kids' books or full-color books at all. So that obviously lessens our impact environmentally, and also kind of tightens up our considerations. We only publish at most 10 books a year, and less books means less printing, less shipping, less of a strain kind of mentally and work-wise on our team, and more attention paid to the authors, especially again at our size and our level of financial resources. So that's kind of, I think, the principle that undergirds our approach. So I thought for this presentation that I would basically just take you through kind of the elements of our production processes and the things that we kind of do at Invisible to maintain our sustainability standards. We don't have a kind of like grand plan so much as we try to approach this whole enterprise kind of piece by piece and figure out where we could be improving from, as things as small as the kinds of envelopes that we ship our books in to things as big as, like what they're made of and how they get to where they need to go. So we print all of our books at a small family-owned printer in Quebec, Imprimerie Gauvin. Because of that relationship and their size, because they're also a relatively small sized printer, we can have in-depth one-on-one conversations with them about specific books, paper stocks, what might work, where we can kind of, do very small things to have larger impacts. They have a similar environmental consideration as us, so we're often coming to each book on the same page, which is really nice. Because we only use one printer, we can also consolidate shipments of all our books in a season. So we're even going so far as to, well, when we can, to plan publication dates and shipping dates around consolidating stock and kind of lessening our environmental impact that way, so that we have less trucks on the road carrying our books. So all of that has required further planning in advance. We can't be as last minute with our books, because we try to group publication shipments, even if books are coming out a month or 2 months after one another. So that does require a little bit of work, and is something that we're constantly trying to meet, although very rarely actually meeting it. And vis-a-vis our printer, in fact, they were the ones almost 8 years ago now who turned us on to, at the time, a company called Roland Enviro Print is the paper that we use. They're now called Sustana, which is the paper that we use for all of our books. And then the last thing on the printing front, they also happen to be very close to our office, just a few hours away. So we cut down on shipping costs and all of the impacts of that. I've kind of boiled it down when thinking of publishing to the two main things being, or the three main things, I suppose, being printing the actual products that we're making, shipping, which unfortunately is involved in everything, and travel, people shipping, if you will. So paper. Paper standards are all over the map. This is probably something that everybody on this webinar knows, and there's no singular definition, unfortunately, of eco-friendly paper. However, all of our books are printed on Sustana, Enviro, and Cover. So Sustana contains 100% post-consumer fiber, is manufactured using renewable energy, which is biogas, and there's some really interesting stuff on their website about that, and is processed chlorine-free. Plus, it's SFC and Ancient Forest Friendly certified. And I think that that's a fairly common thing, maybe in Canada especially. One thing that we do a little bit differently is that all of our covers are printed on uncoated paper. So while that increases the risk of damage, it also makes them, less the glue on their spines, fully recyclable and compostable. So we don't use spot gloss or foil. We don't use French flaps. And this is something I think that a lot of people are worried about doing because of the possibility for increased damage, but we've fielded relatively few complaints in regard to damage. And in fact, the kind of texture that uncoated paper gives each book in the color absorption that's kind of particular to the coating or the lack of coating, gives our books a really cohesive and recognizable look and feel, both in stores, but especially when we do things like fairs or events. So that's actually kind of played into the aesthetic of the press and helped us create a brand in ways beyond, print advertising, things like that. So I think that has become a net positive for us, both environmentally and also just bringing recognizability to our books. So using a ton of Sustain EnviroPrint rather than virgin paper saves the equivalent of 24 trees, 1,773 gallons of water, and 3,402 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. So I feel like that's one of the biggest ways that we've made this commitment to sustainability. And then tied into all of that is trim sizes. So again, tied into kind of scope and keeping it limited, we only have 3 trim sizes, and the vast majority of our books are all 1 trim size, which is 5" by 8". This makes it easier to predict the size of boxes, easier to consolidate shipments, both from our printer, as I said earlier, but also, from our own office, and adds to the kind of aesthetic cohesion that I mentioned earlier, because all the books kind of sit the same on a shelf. Next thing is print runs and inventory management. So this is, I guess, the kind of bane of all production and inventory people's lives, but it's very difficult to manage inventory in the book industry. So as much as possible, all of our books are produced in small batches and reprinted to meet demand and avoid waste. Yes, that does lead to higher printing costs per unit, but it's also nice to have to think less about pulping, storage costs, things like that. I'm lucky that we're a not-for-profit publisher. We don't have an owner. Obviously, we try to make money, and all of the money goes back into, running our operation and paying our authors. But it means that we can kind of stomach making a little bit less on each book for those considerations. So tied to those print run sizes are the goal that we've been able to meet, thankfully, with the help of lots of other people, especially Laura Brady, to have accessible digital editions available simultaneously. And yes, I feel like there's a caveat to virtually all of these points. Reading devices for ebooks require the mining of resources from the earth. But as folks aren't buying readers specifically for our books and are often reading on phones and laptops that they use for other purposes, we think of this as an element of sustainability still. That said, also, climate justice is intrinsically tied to disability justice and many other forms of justice. So we think that this is a really important point too. Tied to that, we offer both finished and advanced PDF and EPUB copies to potential reviewers first. And we offer printed advanced copies on demand to reduce overprinting and subsequent waste. And we've also made the switch to digital-only catalogs via Catalyst and Edelweiss. All of these things have they have a cost. They sometimes disappoint authors, sometimes disappoint reviewers and things like that. So it's all a bit of a balance, but that's something that we've made a kind of explicit, attempt at. So that leads me to author and staff education. Again, as a not-for-profit publisher, we have a mission, which is to support literary communities and emerging writers. And we see education as a big part of our responsibility. So when we discuss author touring, galleys and advanced copies, print materials, and especially things like swag with authors and our staff, we try to make sustainability at the forefront of that conversation. Sometimes that can lead to difficult conversations, but I find that the line of thinking that, we try to put everything into the books, the content of the books, the way that we discuss the books, phone calls with independent bookstores, kind of the personal touch that we bring to every book as the counterpoint to some of the more unsustainable, I suppose, practices. And yeah, that leads to, I guess, local sales events. So something that we're working on now is scaling back our staff travel as events are ramping back up, both kind of consumer-facing events like Word on the Street, and also things like the Frankfurt Book Fair, the Brooklyn Book Festival, etc. So this is a really tough thing because I feel like, there's a lot of FOMO, real or imagined, that comes with missing these kind of things. And we don't miss all of them, but we are trying to think more and more about this. And to offset that, we are thinking more about kind of creating sustainable, both financially and environmentally, local events in our own communities. Now that's kind of an interesting thing when you have a remote publishing company. But I, live in Fredericton, and just as an example, this past Christmas, we had a big holiday book market here with local publishers that made a phenomenal amount of money and had a huge impact on the literary community here, and didn't require us to ship anything or travel anywhere. So, we are skipping word on the street this year for many reasons, but one of the major considerations was, that we would have to travel there, and if we're doing more things like these sort of local sales events, we can kind of cut down on things like that. And I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was shipping. So when we were in Toronto, our office was in Toronto for about a year and a half, and it just moved to Picton in November. We used a service called Goodfoot Delivery, and this is something that I kind of wanted to turn on all the people in Toronto to. Goodfoot Delivery is a not-for-profit company that provides meaningful employment for the neurodiverse community through a reliable professional courier service delivered via public transit and on foot. So we had many meetings with them, and we got a really good rate that essentially made our book sales in our kind of inter-office delivery within Toronto cheaper to go through Goodfoot, and there was virtually no emissions tied to that because all of the couriers were going via transit or on foot. And so that's an amazing service that I'm really sad not to be able to use anymore. And then for our direct-to-consumer sales, all of our envelopes and boxes are recyclable or reusable, depending on the condition. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of sustainability very broadly, and the kind of measures on a kind of like part-by-part basis that we try to bring to our publishing program. What keeps us up at night is probably what keeps all of you up at night, both in terms of money and also in terms of sustainability, which is shipping. We still haven't been able to solve the problem of shipping. I'm not entirely convinced by kind of so-called carbon neutral or shipping or buying offsets and things like that. And books are dense and they're very heavy, and that to me is both a huge financial concern, but also a huge environmental concern. And unfortunately, print-on-demand services, for instance, ones that are located in Australia that would save us the emissions of having to ship to Australia, don't tend to use recycled paper right now. So the virgin paper is kind of a thing that we're not willing to do. Travel, like I mentioned earlier, we're really trying to cut back on that, but unfortunately, it's still necessitated for a few events and returns, which I think is a whole can of worms that I'm not even really willing to get into here. And then all the regular existential indie publishing questions. So that's it for my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Norm. I empathize with many things that you've said. I really like the way you're allowing sustainability goals to lead your business model and your publishing scope. I feel envious of your format sizes. I've proposed that idea at our company, and it kind of interferes with the artistic design of some books. So I'll reapproach that idea. And also shipping heavy books is a difficult problem. And I think that perhaps Sandra may have some information. Sandra is our next speaker, Sandra Shaw from the University of Toronto Press. She's University of Toronto Press is Canada's leading academic publisher and one of the largest university presses in North America. So Sandra, if you'd like to share your presentation.
Thank you, EJ. Let me just share my screen. Sorry. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here. It's wonderful to be a part of this panel. I'm Sandra Shaw. I'm the Director for Editorial Design and Production at the University of Toronto Press. And before I begin speaking about our sustainability journey, let me tell you a little bit about the press. UTP is a nonprofit, mission-driven university press that was founded in 1901. There are two publishing divisions or publishing units at the press, journals and books. Our journals unit publishes over 65 scholarly journals online and in print, and in a variety of disciplines, including social sciences, humanities, and medicine. We publish over 3,000 articles per year, and our content is read in 190 countries. Our book publishing unit publishes around 200 books per year, including scholarly monographs, textbooks, and trade nonfiction. Books are published in print and ebook format. In 2023, UTP launched its audiobook program, and we're now publishing select titles in audiobook format as well. What makes UTP unique is that we have a distribution and a retail division. Our distribution division works with over 200 publishers to distribute materials and has warehouses in New York State and in Toronto. Our retail division manages the 5 University of Toronto bookstores across 3 campuses, which gives us a direct connection to students and faculty at U of T. UTP's mission is to connect ideas for a better world. One of the ways we achieve this goal is to partner with organizations that promote equitable access to knowledge, a healthy environment, and positive global transformation. 3 of these organizations include the United Nations, C40 Cities, and Research for Life. And I'll speak more about each of these organizations later in the presentation. I'll begin with some of our strategies for success. We've already begun our sustainability journey, and we've already made a number of positive changes across the press towards achieving sustainability. We've done this by staying on top of industry activity and seeking out opportunities and resources, which has led to some of the partnerships I just mentioned a moment ago. By cultivating a global and diverse network of authors, editors, and reviewers, we've been able to develop and publish content related to climate and sustainability while ensuring we're representing voices from around the world. UTP engages internal teams and stakeholders by communicating advances in the area of sustainability and by promoting these activities to motivate and inspire our employees and customers and other people that we work with. Externally, we also communicate with customers and other external parties about the initiatives that we've undertaken, so they're aware of the journey that we're taking towards sustainability. We work with vendors such as printers and transportation companies who follow sustainable practices and have the same values and goals as UTP. And finally, we continue to learn about what other organizations in the industry are doing by attending webinars and discussions such as this one today. Challenges include time, which I think is a common challenge for most publishers. Finding the time to invest in these initiatives is always a challenge, with time being the commodity that it is. However, UTP does recognize the value and the importance of being a sustainable publisher and to making a contribution to the publishing industry and landscape. And so we have dedicated time to these important initiatives. Another challenge that we faced is with our infrastructure. So in some cases, our systems and our workflows were not initially developed with sustainable practices in mind, like using print on demand or converting some of our formats to a digital format. And so we've had to update tools and processes along the way to support these alternative formats, these new print workflows, and we have dedicated time, staff, and resources to this process. Finally, as with everything, there is a cost associated with implementing sustainable strategies. We've made a large investment into updating our tools, into engaging new vendors who follow sustainable practices, in communicating change both externally and internally, and to develop new products that focus on the subject area of climate and sustainability. In our distribution division, they've had challenges such as truck driver shortages, fuel and equipment price instability, international instability, and supply chain issues. Now we'll speak a little bit about some of our success stories as we continue through our sustainability journey. UTP collaborates with printers and distributors to minimize their carbon footprint by using vendors in Canada, the US, Australia, and Europe to reduce the transportation impact by printing and distributing locally. UTP uses print on demand to reduce overstock, limiting the effects of storage on the environment, such as physical space and the consumption of electricity and other resources. As I mentioned earlier, UTP works with printers who follow sustainable practices such as reuse and recycling, compliance with environmental laws and regulations, and using vegetable-based inks and recycled wooden pallets. Finally, UTP uses Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC, certified products, ensuring that our materials come from verified and responsible sources that have met FSC's strict requirements, strict environmental and social requirements. UTP is a proud signatory to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which were established to inspire organizations globally to commit to sustainable practices to improve health and education around the world, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, and prevent further climate change. There are 17 SDGs, which you can see in the graphic, including ending poverty, producing affordable and clean energy, developing sustainable cities and communities, and taking climate action. As part of this initiative, UTP has signed the Publishers Compact, along with hundreds of other publishers from around the globe. The Publishers Compact was launched in collaboration with the International Publishers Association and aims to accelerate progress to achieve the SDGs by 2030. There are 10 goals for publishers, which include a commitment to actively promoting and acquiring content that advocates for sustainability, strengthening the environment, justice and equality, as well as ensuring publishers dedicate budget and other resources to promote SDG principles and achieve these goals. UTP is committed to publishing content that supports and promotes SDG principles. And here's just a small selection of some of our recent book titles that we've printed in this area, or that we've published in this area. UTP also publishes journals content that focuses on climate change and sustainability. And in some cases, we publish in areas where you may not expect there to be a connection with climate change. For example, we recently published an issue of the Canadian Theatre Review that looked at the connection between climate change and theatre, from building ecologically friendly set designs to staging productions about sustainability. We also published a special section on climate in Seminar, a journal of Germanic studies, which looked at how to incorporate positive attitudes towards sustainability or a green mindset in teaching. We also published a special issue of the Canadian Journal of Film Studies, which looked at climate change and the cinema, and how cinema can be used to engage audiences in discourse and action related to climate change. One of our most important relationships began in 2020 when UTP published a book with former Toronto Mayor David Miller entitled Solved. David Miller is an economist and a lawyer by training, but he has a passion for halting climate change and promoting sustainable practices. In his book, Solved, David Miller discusses how cities around the world are working together to address the global climate crisis. David Miller is currently the managing director for the Center for City Climate Policy and Economy at C40 Cities. C40 Cities is a global network of over 100 cities from around the world working together to address the global climate crisis. The mayors of these cities are committed to using an inclusive, science-based, and collaborative approach to cut their fair share of emissions in half by 2030, to help the world limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and build healthy, equitable, and resilient communities. This map illustrates the global reach of C40 Cities. Why cities? Cities are important in the fight against climate change because while they occupy only 2% of the world's landmass, cities consume around 75% of the world's energy. They create over 70% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and cities generate over 80% of the world's GDP. In 2022, UTP launched the Journal of City Climate Policy and Economy in partnership with C40 Cities and David Miller. David Miller serves as the editor for the journal. The journal aims to be a vehicle into research, policy, and economic change that is required to drive the climate agenda. The journal was launched under the subscribed open model to encourage broad global dissemination of research and to provide a relatively low cost for the research community. In relation to the Journal of City Climate Policy and Economy, UTP also developed and launched the Cities 1.5 podcast in partnership with C40 Cities. This is meant to complement David Miller's book and the journal. The podcast features progressive policy conversations with urban leaders and is hosted by David Miller. Guests include mayors, policymakers, economists, youth leaders, and scholars who are all working towards transformative solutions to the world's most pressing climate challenges, and features new episodes every week. UTP also has proudly partnered with Research for Life for more than 10 years to provide free access to all of our journal content to institutions in low and middle income countries. Research for Life provides these institutions with online access to academic and peer-reviewed content from a variety of disciplines. Their goal is to ensure that valuable information around research, policymaking, and health, agriculture, and the environment is available to communities who may not otherwise be able to afford access to this content. At this time, 125 low and middle income countries receive free or low cost access to content from up to 200 publishers around the world. Over 11,000 institutions are registered with Research for Life, and users can access over 200,000 scientific journals, books, and databases. There are 5 programs within Research for Life that provide access to resources related to health, agriculture, the environment, innovation, and global justice. And finally, in terms of next steps, while UTP is very proud of the accomplishments that we've made to date and the work that we have done towards implementing sustainable practices and publishing valuable research about climate and the environment, of course, there's always more work that can be done. One of our main goals for this year is to expand our print-on-demand practices to grow our global network of printers and distributors in regions such as Asia and Australia, and to set up all UTP books under this model. The distribution division at UTP is also working to expand their print-on-demand services by partnering with local printers in Canada to provide sustainable options for Canadian printers and to reduce overstock and the effects of unnecessary transportation. As part of this work, we will also realize improved inventory management, both in publishing and distribution. UTP will continue to offer digital alternatives to print, such as ebook, audiobook, online publishing, and podcasts. And finally, with many of these initiatives in place or soon to be in place, the next step will be to gather and analyze data to assess the benefits of the work that we've done and look towards what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm so interested in all the tools you're publishing and the content you're publishing to address climate change. And I liked your first slide where you outline a list of strategies to follow, because following those strategies can help you identify what's most important, what can be done easily in the short term, and then also what's a long-term project with more investment. And now, finally, to inspire us and provide an international perspective, we have Karina Stevens, who's the production director at UK's multi-award winning independent children's publishing company, the Nosy Crow. Please go ahead, Sandra. Or sorry, Karina.
Right. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. It didn't work previously, so let's see. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my slides okay? Firstly, I just want to apologize in advance to the ASL interpreter because I've been told I speak really quickly. So I really apologize, and to the captioner. I've never had to do one of these with an interpreter or a captioner before. So this is revolutionary to me. Also, I'm just want to point out, obviously, that I'm from a UK publishing house, and it's occurring to me as I'm hearing these presentations that I'm incredibly ignorant about the Canadian publishing scene and what sustainability means to you and how you're approaching it. It's really interesting and how different it is. And I think, and it makes me think that sharing across territories is something we should absolutely be doing more of. Right, let me just start. Actually, I just think I also just want to say apologies in advance. I have a bit of a rubbish internet connection when it rains here, which it does all the time. My internet at home is a bit poor. So my name is Karina Stevens. I am the production director at Nosy Crow. A bit about Nosy Crow is we are an SME with rapid growth, I would say, founded in 2011. So we're about 13 years old now. And we publish the full range of children's products, very different from what you've seen so far today, incredibly different. Please do feel free to go to our website, because I think I haven't got enough time here to show you all the types of things that we do. But yeah, we publish children's books from 0 to 12 years old. And we publish full gamut from black and white fiction, color picture books, non-fiction, and we do a whole host of novelty board books for children from the ages of 0 from birth to 3. So yeah, we're just going to talk a bit about myself, starting at Nosy Crow, my background, just to give you a little bit of context. Implementing a sustainability strategy and focusing on scope 3. You've got to be in it to win it. It will become clear when we get to those slides. Challenges in finding balance, and where Nosy Crow are today and what we're hoping to do tomorrow. So a bit about me. This is my favorite photo of myself at Paper Mill in Finland, in front of a Superol. I have worked for 7 publishing companies in my career. I won't tell you how long I've been in publishing for, it's a very long time. I started out in Octopus Publishing, actually the Hamlin division, which was then management by Octopus, and now they're part of Hachette. Then I went to an independent publisher in Annes for a brief period, and then I spent most of my career at Penguin, where I was there for like 13 years. And I worked across all the imprints there, but mostly on the children's, of which there's a few of the logos there. Then I went from Penguin to Macmillan, actually Pan Macmillan, where I looked after their children's division. I hope some of you have heard of the Gruffalo. And actually Axel Scheffler, who is the illustrator of the Gruffalo, he is one of the owners and original founders of Nosy Crow. Then I went from Macmillan to Little Tiger, also an independent publishing, children's publisher. Since I left there, they then had gone into partnership with PRH US. Then I went to Bonnier Books, where I was the group production director. And after that, I left and went to Nosy Crow. Okay. So I just want to give a bit of background context to the state of the nation when I started at Nosy Crow. I was hired as a temporary contract for maternity cover for the then head of operations and production. And I had about 6 hours of handover before she had to leave unexpectedly early due to high blood pressure. The situation was we were knee deep in supply chain crisis caused by the Ever Given blocking the Suez Canal. I don't know if any of you were affected by that. It's something I never want to go through again. We had on the result of that, we had skyrocketing prices, particularly in freight, and also in conjunction with that was just the sheer rate of growth of Nosy Crow. Nosy Crow has grown roughly a third year on year since it began. As I said, we published a full range of children's books, all the different formats, and all our fiction is printed in the UK, but we do a huge amount. The vast majority of what we publish is actually children's board books and novelty, and that is published in China. And then with that comes all the issues of freight. And so where were we when I started in June 2021? So we were using mostly FSC paper, but not all. I won't go into the explanations of FSC paper since Sandra gave a very good explanation of that already. And we belong to a group called the Book Chain Project. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. I think the slides will be shared with you, but I do really recommend, and I will talk about it a little bit more later on, but I do really recommend that you check them out. This is essentially a group which was founded by UK publishers. And there are 3 tools within that, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But being members of the Book Chain Project has been fundamental to us progressing in our sustainability journey at Nosy Crow. And I would say it's the same for many publishers in the UK. We also, part of our supply chain policy was to have internationally recognized labour audits, of which top of the list is ICTY, and we also accept SEDEX 4-pillar, which includes environmental standards. So really, I'm not going to go through this because I'm sure you all know what scopes 1, 2, and 3 are. But essentially for us in the publishing world, scope 3 is really where it's at when you're talking about carbon. I have a question for people actually, which I'm not expecting you to answer here, but I was interested that nobody's mentioned about mapping their carbon footprint. It really is the biggest focus amongst UK publishers, that the first step is to map your carbon footprint, to know how much carbon that you are actually producing as a business in order to set targets to reduce that, and to do it in a very scientific and audited way. And it's incredibly difficult for a business which has all the different types of products and manufacturing. We literally manufacture it all over the world, and our customers are all over the world. So, and we do, although we do ebooks and we do audio, most of our books are for children, and therefore the physical nature of that book is essential to the success of our publishing. You can't obviously, well, you could if they were a genius, I guess, but you can't really give, electronic goods to a baby. And the physical nature of what we produce is as important as the content in children's publishing for young children. So focusing on scope 3. And so I've had many conversations with people in the publishing industry about this, because I have to say one of the biggest challenges is just knowing what it all means, understanding the jargon, knowing what you have to do. It's mind-boggling, it's huge, it's complex, it's constantly changing. And so really for us, for focusing on scope 3, it is, you have to focus on the paper. It is the biggest for us, and in my business, it is the biggest place where your carbon is being produced. And therefore, focusing on our paper, reducing our tonnage, that has to be our #1 priority if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint. And so one of the things that we have done is we have swapped our boards for lighter weight boards, which still bulk the same. So these 2 series, we literally produce millions of these for customers all around the world every year. Nosy Crow turns over around about £24 million a year. We publish 150 new titles a year in the UK. And we have these huge series. The Where's Mr. Line is a series called Felt Flaps, and the one below is a Busy Bear series. And we print these in batches because they're enormous. We'll do at least 500,000 per batch over multiple titles. So you can imagine the sheer amount of paper that we're consuming in order to produce these is significant. So for any changes, any reductions that we can make in the tonnage of using those will have the biggest, most immediate effect on our carbon footprint. So we were using a 350-gram board. I'm not sure how that translates into Canadian terms. Someone will have to do that calculation for me. But essentially, we sourced a new lighter weight board, but that's still buckle seam. So there was no discernible difference to the customer at all. But as a result, we reduced our tonnage by 7% by doing that. That's something I'm incredibly proud of. We also coincidentally reduced our costs by doing that, and sort of linking your sustainability strategy, which I have to say we aren't not for profit, is something that I think as a business we need to do. I'm very aware I haven't got much time, so I'm going to race through these. So yeah, you got to be in it to win it. This is one of the biggest challenges, I think, as a small to medium enterprise, is your resource, and just being informed, being involved, going to the forums, going to the meetings, speaking when you go to them, having an opinion, wanting to learn, being open to ideas. These, for me, in the strategy are essential. And these are just a few of the groups that I belong to. I belong to many forums and groups and projects, and I spend a lot of my time and my own personal time, quite honestly, being involved in these and yeah, taking part. Yeah, for the book chain project, there are 3 major tools. One is forest sourcing, the second one is chemicals and materials, and third one is labor environment, and they all touch upon sustainability. There are links in my slides to them, which will tell you a bit about what they all do. I highly recommend that people join if they possibly can. The labor and environment tool is for free. There is a cheaper version of the forestry sourcing. This one, I don't know if any of you know about it, but essentially we manage the provenance of our papers. Through that, all our suppliers also have to submit environmental questionnaires, and it's starting that journey of mapping carbon footprint through our suppliers and through paper mills. The chemicals and materials is really, for us, it's important for our safety testing for children's product, because they have to meet so many levels of legislation depending on where you're publishing or where you're selling to. And it's actually very technical and a huge amount of work. But these and being involved, speaking up, having an opinion, these things, learning, these things are incredibly important. And the Book Chain project is a huge part of my sustainability journey. And then just challenges and balance. These are the challenges for us, which is knowledge, just learning about this stuff. Man, there's so much stuff and it changes all the time, all the different acronyms and jargon, just constantly learning and being involved. Your resource and your time. When I started at Nosy Crow, there were 5 people in my team. I now have 10. It has been, and we're growing hugely. So at Nosy Crow itself, we're just over 50 people when I started, and we're almost 100 now. This is the rate of change that we're going through, and putting sustainability at the top of the agenda is a challenge. And I'm always thinking about this urgent versus important matrix. And for me, it's pushing that to the top of the agenda for the leadership in my business all the time. Commercial reality, I think has been said before, it's not cheap to be sustainable. It's not the cheapest option, but we are a business that is for profit. So having to balance that is a challenge. And capacity and capability is literally, there is not the capacity or the capability in Europe to produce most of the products that we publish at Nosy Crow. There is no capability outside of China, really. There's very limited to do hand-assembled novelty board books. And that is a challenge. So there will always be an element of freight that is involved. But, at the minute for us, due to sheer numbers, freight produces near 19% less carbon than road freight for us to the same destination. So because we do not have electrified fleets in Europe yet, and most of that energy is coming from fossil fuels. So I think also knowing where your energy is coming from, understanding where your supplier's energy is coming from. So not necessarily knowing what sustainability strategies your suppliers are having is also incredibly important. And legislation for us, I'm not sure what the state of the nation is in Canada, but in Europe, there is a lot of legislation and it's increasing and growing all the time. The latest one is EU deforestation regulation, which means any products which might have contributed to deforestation are banned in the EU from the end of this year. And we have to prove the provenance of our books, the paper, the wood source of our books, that it doesn't come from areas which might have been deforested. The fact that we use 100% FSC certified paper now is in our favor. The FSC is having to work very hard in order to provide this information. It's so in depth that you have to now provide the geolocation of the wood source of your paper if you are going to import into Europe. And it also applies to other commodities such as soy, cattle, chocolate, cocoa, these kinds of things as well. But wood, obviously, for us is the major one. And greenwashing, this is my personal bugbear. I'm just going to have a little minute just to say about this, because I come across this in all the many forums, because so many publishers, in my experience, are seemingly more concerned with appearing green than really doing the hard work, because it's not an easy thing to achieve. And guarding against that the changes that you're making, that the policies that you're putting in place have real meaning and impact. And it's not just something that you can have a good news story about. It is a challenge. And it's really hard. But then I have to say, you know, these are the things that keep me up at night and make me spend my personal time investing in our sustainability strategy at Nosy Crow. You know, and this is where we are. We have just finished mapping our baseline carbon footprint at Nosy Crow. It was a massive amount of work. It's not perfect by any means. The means in which you can map your carbon footprint are very challenging. But that for me is our biggest achievement, because now it means we can set targets and we can move forward. One of the things we'd like to be able to do is set science-based targets initiatives to verify our mapping and set targets. I would love us to be carbon neutral by 2030. I have to admit, I don't think we're going to get there at the minute. It's a challenge. Yeah, and then like these are the things also, like offsetting is going to have to be a part of our strategy, because there is nothing else at the minute that's available to us within our current business model. And so I think this is going to have to be a stopgap. And I'm thinking when I'm thinking about offsetting, I am very conscious, and I'm part of a big offsetting project group, which is looking into what is available in terms of offsetting, and not all offsetting is equal. And I'm very interested in carbon offsetting projects where they are doing carbon reuse and capture, you know, things like that. Circularity, I think longevity of products is something, you know, these things are not yet built into what is available to us. I would love to be able to sign up to the SDGs Publishers Compact. I'm very jealous of UTP that they've done that already, and that is something definitely on our horizon. Yeah, and just really doing everything we can in order to continue with doing better. And it's a journey, it's a struggle. And yeah, any questions? And that's it for me.
Karina, thank you so much, and congratulations on doing your carbon footprinting. I'd like to say those are the things that keep me up at night as well. So congratulations. We have good news for Canadian publishers. New Society Publishers, along with ECW Press, we've put in and received a grant from Canadian Council, and we are beta testing a tool that will be provided free to all Canadian publishers so that you can measure the footprint of an individual, carbon footprint of an individual print run. And we're also in the process of creating a tool where you can measure your business carbon footprint. So those will be available by the end of this year, hopefully by the middle of this year. And you will definitely hear more about it through BookNet, I'm sure, and the Green Book Alliance. So there'll be a tool to help you with what is a difficult measurement. we're really short on time. It's basically time now. So I will maybe venture to answer one question very quickly, and those of you who have to jump off can. And it's the question, it's been asked about the reuse of printed books. And I picked that question because it has to do with circularity. So the future is a circular economy. So this regards reusing printed books. It has always been contrary to the goals of for-profit publishers. What are the panel's thoughts on making efforts to encourage the reuse of products? So you may envisage Patagonia, for example, who's done a lot of work on building a circular product economy. Would anyone like to volunteer to talk about that topic? Any of the panelists? Okay.
UTP is a not-for-profit publisher, so I can only speak to what we're doing. But we pulp and recycle anything that we don't sell, any overstock. So we're very much in favor of the reuse and recycling of materials that are overstock.
New Society Publishers, we're a for-profit, but we're also mission-driven. And so we like to sell our remainders. We like to donate books. Every time we have our recycle list come up, books that need to be shredded, we immediately try and sell them for a very steeply discounted price to remainder companies. We look for places to donate the books. And being mission driven, we don't see that as competing with our profits. We see it as getting the message out to a wider audience who may not otherwise have the opportunity. And failing that, yes, they are recycled.
I'm interested in Karina's answer to this question, if you have one, Karina, just because we're also a not-for-profit publisher, so it's a little bit less of a consideration there.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. Could you repeat the question again to me?
Sorry, yes. What do you think about instead of destroying books, reusing printed books?
I think, yeah, there's the returns issue. At Nosy Crow, our policy has always been to process and put our books back into circulation. So we've always been very proud of our very low returns rates at Nosy Crow. We pay the money to do that, but many publishers don't, and it's the dirty secret in the UK publishing industry because returns are really high. I think in terms of the other things, like I think the same as you, is we will sell to once. If it doesn't feel like if it has a normal trade life, then it will go to remainders, and failing that, we will send it to book charities. So we do everything we possibly can to not pulp, and in Nosy Crow. But I would say it's a real challenge for many, and particularly big publishers, but their numbers are so high compared to what we do at Nosy Crow. And I have worked for many of those big publishers, and it's a cheaper thing to just throw them away. But it is something that they've all recognised, and it is something that they're trying to address. The thing about all sustainability for me is nothing seems quick enough, fast enough, big enough for us to have this impact to meet these targets. And I think so just one other thing to say about circularity for children's books is, and I think it's something that's not yet built into sustainability models, is the number of uses of a book. And the type of book and how many times it's read and kept. I have many books which I've kept for many years. I collect really old books as well. And for us in children's, we might put finishes on our books. I'm going to be honest, we put loads of finishes on our books. Two things. One, it's meant to extend the lifetime of that book because we intend our books to be used and used and used again. And a lot of our books, particularly the higher price point ones, we want them to be kept and treasured for years to come. I think the other thing is to say, in the old days, you couldn't recycle easily books with finishes, but now you can. There still would be waste. There's still, those things will still exist, and they probably would go into landfill. I think it depends on the kind of book, quite honestly. Does that answer? Sorry, I'm rambling. Does that make sense? Is that useful?
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. So we're about 5 minutes over now. Stephanie, will I pass it back to you? And you may be able to tell people what we do with the questions if their questions weren't answered. Thank you so much to all our panelists. That was really interesting conversations.
Okay, so thank you, EJ, Norm, Sandra, and Karina for your time, for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you to all our attendees for joining us for this presentation. Before we go, we'd love it if you could provide feedback on this session. So we'll drop a link to the survey in the chat. Take a couple of minutes to fill it out. We'll also be emailing you a link to a recording of this session as soon as it's available. We'd like to invite you as well to join us for our upcoming session, Book Industry State of the Nation 2024, which is scheduled for April 2nd. You can find information about all upcoming events and recordings of previous sessions on our website, bnctechforum.ca. And if your question wasn't answered today, feel free to send us an email, bnctechforum@booknetcanada.ca. We'll try to track down an answer for you. Lastly, we'd like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage for their support through the Canada Book Fund. And thanks everyone for attending.